If you're lying, I swear even God won't find you again." The man's voice was low, but it sliced sharper than the cold drizzle falling over the sidewalk. Sarah flinched, not from the threat, but from how right he sounded. She didn't belong here. Not on this cracked Portland sidewalk, not in these weather-worn boots, and definitely not wrapped in a thrift store parka that still smelled faintly of cigarettes and sadness. Yet here she stood in line outside the Haven Street Community Center, surrounded by people who had truly lost everything. Her fingers curled tightly around the strap of her fake canvas duffel. Inside was the minimum: a change of clothes, a comb, and a notebook. Notebooks always made her feel like she still had control. But this wasn't control. This was chaos in disguise. Ahead of her, the line of displaced men and women shuffled slowly forward as the shelter doors opened for the night. And right behind her was the man who'd growled the warning. She turned her head just enough to see him. He was tall, broad, soaked through in a faded Carhartt jacket with one sleeve torn at the elbow. His beard was short, but his jaw clenched like a man who hadn't rested in weeks. And beside him, holding his hand, was a little girl no older than 8, with tangled curls, pink rain boots, and a stuffed rabbit clutched tight to her chest. Sarah's throat tightened. He noticed her gaze and pulled the girl slightly behind him like a shield. "I don't want trouble," Sarah said softly, keeping her eyes down. "Then walk on," he said, eyes scanning her face. "You're too clean for this place." I've been clean for 2 days, she offered, hoping her voice trembled just enough. "Not like that." He nodded toward her hands. "No blisters, no calluses, and you flinched when your boots touched that puddle." Sarah swallowed hard. This was the real test, wasn't it? No media, no makeup, no entourage. Just her and the brutal honesty of people with nothing left to lose. Before she could respond, the little girl peeked around her father's side. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you someone's mommy?" Sarah's heart stopped. The girl's wide brown eyes were impossibly sincere. Mark Sarah didn't know his name yet, but she would cleared his throat. "Lily." "Don't. I'm not," Sarah said, then added softly. "But I can listen, if that's okay." The girl looked up at her dad with a questioning tilt of her head. The man, his expression guarded, studied Sarah like she was a landmine with a pretty face. "Look," he said, finally, voice hushed but firm. "There's no room for play acting in this line. People here are cold, hungry, barely surviving. You want to watch and write about it for a blog, go find someone else. I'm just trying to protect my kid. I'm not writing anything," Sarah said almost too quickly. "I don't even have a phone on me. I just need a place to sleep tonight." He hesitated. Something in her voice, something cracked and unpolished, made him pause. Sarah wasn't sure if it was her acting or something else entirely. But he finally let out a sigh so heavy it made his shoulders slump. "We're full up where we stay," he muttered. "But the back hallway's dry if you're quiet." "Lily sleeps light. I will be," Sarah promised. And that was it. No more questions, no last names. Just a nod and a doorway. Mark didn't speak again as he led Lily inside the center, down a narrow corridor that smelled like old mop water and borrowed time. He laid down 2 blankets in a corner, handed one to Sarah without a word, and curled his body around his daughter as she fell asleep. Sarah lay on the cold linoleum, staring at the ceiling tiles above. What was she doing? She could be at her penthouse right now. Marble floors, Egyptian cotton sheets, and a silent view of the Willamette River. Instead, she was here. With a stranger. With his child. Pretending to be a person she'd only ever read about in charity reports. She hadn't meant for this to go that far. But the moment Lily had looked up at her, something had shifted. By morning, the rain had slowed, and the room smelled of instant oatmeal and damp socks. Sarah sat cross-legged, quietly tying her shoes. Mark was already up packing their meager belongings, 2 plastic bags and a dented lunchbox. Lily rubbed sleep from her eyes and walked over to Sarah. "You didn't snore," the little girl said, almost disappointed. Sarah smiled. I'll try harder next time. Mark raised an eyebrow at her. You're still here. I said I would be quiet, she replied, straightening up. He nodded, slow and cautious. You got anywhere to go today? No, she answered honestly. I was hoping. Maybe I could tag along. Lily beamed. Can she? Daddy Mark's jaw tensed. He looked at Sarah like he wanted to say no but couldn't find a reason that didn't sound cruel. We're picking up bottles, he said. We return them for change. You up for that? I am, she said, voice steady. All right, he said, but if I find out you're playing us… I'm not, Sarah, interrupted her voice lower now. You don't have to believe me. Just let me prove it. Mark didn't smile, but his gaze lingered for an extra beat before he turned away. Later that afternoon, after hours of walking alleys and sorting recyclables, Sarah sat beside Mark on a graffiti-covered curb, the weight of 3 hours and $2 in coins between them. You're not good at this, Mark muttered. Sarah blew hair from her face. I've noticed. He looked at her for the first time without suspicion. But you didn't quit. I said I needed to be here. Yeah, he said slowly. Still don't know why? Sarah glanced at Lily, who was humming quietly to her stuffed rabbit. I don't think I know yet either, she said truthfully. That night, back in the hallway, Lily curled up beside Sarah without hesitation. Are you going to be my new mommy? The girl asked sleepily. Sarah froze. Mark's head whipped toward them, but Lily was already drifting off. Sarah whispered so soft only the silence could hear it. I don't know, sweetheart. But I'm not going anywhere. You know, Mark said, glancing sideways, if you're going to stay here, you might want to stop flinching every time the microwave beeps. It's just leftovers, not a bomb. Sarah offered a weak smile. Cheeks flushed. I didn't grow up around old appliances. Mark let out a breath, half amused, half suspicious, and turned back to the tiny stove in the corner of the cramped apartment. The place was barely more than a converted garage with peeling linoleum floors and a water heater that groaned every 10 minutes like it resented being alive. Sarah sat stiffly at the chipped kitchen table doing her best to blend in, but everything about her screamed misfit from the way she held the plastic fork like a foreign object to the small wince she couldn't hide when Lily scraped her chair across the floor. Lily, of course, was oblivious to it all. She twirled spaghetti on her fork with the gusto of a child too young to care about propriety and too pure to notice how broken the world around her really was. I like your hair, Lily said suddenly, mouthful of noodles. Sarah blinked. My hair. It looks like sunshine if it got sad. Mark almost choked on his bite. Sarah tilted her head, genuinely intrigued. That's oddly poetic. She talks like that, Mark muttered. It's either cartoons or metaphors with her. Lily grinned proudly as if that were a badge of honor. The meal was simple. Overcooked spaghetti with ketchup pretending to be sauce. A single slice of white bread with no butter. Water from the tap. Sarah had eaten in Parisian bistros on yachts in boardrooms overlooking Wall Street. But somehow none of those meals had ever felt as vulnerable as this one. She took a cautious bite. The fork bent. It's plastic. Mark deadpanned. You're not supposed to fight it. I'm not used to things breaking this easily, she said before realizing how it sounded. Mark's eyes narrowed. No offense, but why are you really here? People don't just drop out of nowhere and ask to sleep on a stranger's floor, not unless they're running from something. Sarah held his gaze. Maybe I am. He nodded slowly but didn't push. Not yet. Later that night, Lily insisted Sarah tuck her in. She smells like that candle at Miss Maggie's office. Lily explained, snuggling beneath the threadbare blanket. Not the one that smells like old people. The one that smells like stories. Sarah smiled, brushing hair back from Lily's forehead. Good night, little poet. As the girl drifted off, Mark leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. She's not used to having anyone around, I can tell, Sarah said, but she's incredible. Mark looked at his daughter with the kind of love that ached. She doesn't remember her mom. Not really, just the color of her dress, the way she sang, "You are my sunshine," when it rained. Sarah's voice softened. That's more than most kids remember. Mark turned to her. Don't make her promises you can't keep. I haven't promised her anything. You've stayed 2 nights, he said. That's already more than most. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of running water and the sharp clang of something hitting metal. In the kitchen, Mark was wrestling with the sink, his arm elbow-deep in rusted pipes. His shirt was soaked at the collar. I think it's winning, Sarah offered, stepping into the doorway. Mark looked up. You know anything about plumbing, no, but I once bought a faucet worth more than this apartment. Great, he said. Then you can tell the pipe how inferior it is. Sarah knelt beside him. Show me what to do. He studied her for a long beat. You're serious, I'm here, aren't I? He handed her the wrench. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. I know that one, she said, smiling. It took over an hour, but when the water finally stopped leaking and the ancient pipes groaned in reluctant surrender, Sarah was covered in grime and grinning like a child who'd just built her first sandcastle. Mark laughed. Actually laughed. Okay, I'll admit it, he said. You're not totally useless. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me this week. He handed her a towel. Still don't believe your story, but thanks. For what? For showing up, even if it's just for now. That afternoon, Mark had to go out for day labor. A construction site across town. He hesitated at the door, holding his work gloves like a shield. You'll be okay here with her? Sarah nodded. Of course. She gets scared if the power flickers. Just sing or something. I don't really sing, Sarah confessed. Mark paused. You've been here 2 days. Learned how to eat like us. Talk like us. Fix pipes. You'll figure it out. Sarah gave a small nod. Be safe. Alone in the apartment, Sarah sat with Lily on the faded couch. The little girl was coloring tongue poking out in focus. Do you miss your old house? Lily asked. Sarah froze. What you talk different, Lily said. Like TV. But not the silly shows. The ones where people wear suits and always have somewhere to be. Sarah smiled faintly. I guess. I used to have somewhere to be. All the time. Why don't you now? Sarah looked out the window. Rain tapped softly on the glass. Because I needed to remember what it feels like. To stop. Lily looked up. I think you forgot how to sit still, too. Sarah laughed, tears stinging her eyes for reasons she didn't fully understand. You might be right. That evening, Mark returned soaked, tired, and limping slightly. Sarah rushed to help. What happened? Just a nail, he said. Caught my boot wrong. You should disinfect it. I'll be fine. You shouldn't. I said, I'll be fine. His voice had an edge this time. Not anger, just exhaustion trying to wear armor. Sarah didn't push. But later that night, when he was asleep, she quietly slipped a small first aid kit from her bag, one of the few things she'd kept from her old life, and left it beside his shoes. She didn't know if he'd find it, or if he'd throw it away. But as she lay on the thin mattress beside Lily, listening to the girl's soft breathing and the creak of an old house standing its ground against the wind, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not guilt, not fear, but something dangerously close to belonging. I used to believe people wore masks only at parties. Sarah whispered more to herself than to anyone else. Now I know some of the heaviest ones are worn in daylight. Mark didn't respond. He was at the sink scrubbing the bottom of a dented pot with the kind of focus that looked like avoidance. Lily was at the table drawing a sun with crayons that were down to their nubs. The apartment smelled faintly of damp wood and instant coffee. The third morning had settled over them like a truce. Sarah had been here long enough to know where the spoons were when the pipes rattled and how the light in the small window turned gold at exactly 7:12 a.m. But she also felt the weight of time pressing against her ribs. This wasn't a vacation or a stunt anymore. She was embedded inside their lives, inside their rhythm, and she could feel her old world clawing at the edges. Mark finally broke the silence. "You ever gonna tell me what you're running from?" Sarah kept her voice calm. "What makes you think I'm running?" "You sleep with your shoes near the door," he said flatly. "People who plan to stay don't do that." Sarah's fingers tightened around her mug. She thought about Nathan's email still sitting unread on her burner phone, the one she'd sworn she wouldn't touch while she was here. If she didn't go back soon, the board would hand her seat to someone else. A lifetime of building an empire undone because she'd traded glass towers for linoleum floors. "I'm not running," she said finally. "I'm just learning." Mark wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the counter. Learning what Sarah hesitated, then met his eyes. What it feels like to have nothing but still keep going. He didn't say anything, but his gaze softened just a fraction. Later that day, Sarah walked with Lily to the small playground behind the community center, while Mark picked up extra shifts. The swings creaked, the slide was chipped, but Lily played as if it were Disneyland. "You draw a lot," Sarah said, sitting on the bench as Lily sketched with a stub of purple crayon. "It helps me see things," Lily said, matter-of-factly. "Sometimes when you draw something, you can hold it, even if it's gone." Sarah's throat tightened. "That's very wise for someone your age." "I'm 8.5, Lily corrected. She held up her drawing. It was 3 stick figures under a crooked roof, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with long hair. Sarah blinked. "Who's that?" Lily shrugged shyly. "Just someone I wish was real." Sarah looked at the paper for a long time before whispering, "Sometimes wishes do come true, but not always the way we think." Lily tilted her head. "Do you wish for things all the time?" "Like what?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Like finding out who I am without all the noise." When they returned, Mark was home early, leaning against the kitchen counter holding his phone with a look that could crack glass. "Someone's been looking for you," he said without preamble. Sarah's heart stuttered. What a guy in a suit came by the center asking about a woman fitting your description. Said he was a lawyer. Her stomach dropped. "Nathan." Mark's voice was low but steady. He gave Maggie his card. "She said she'd tell you." Sarah swallowed. "I don't know who that would be." Mark stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Don't lie to me. I've been lied to enough." "I'm not." She stopped herself. The truth balanced on her tongue like a blade. Mark stared at her for another long moment, then exhaled sharply and turned away. "Forget it. I don't care who you were before. Just don't hurt my kid." "I wouldn't," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." That evening, while Lily did homework at the table, Sarah sat on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. She remembered being 15, her parents dragging her to poverty immersion trips for PR photos. She remembered their smiles, plastic, polished, rehearsed. She remembered promising herself she would never use someone else's suffering as a prop. And now, here she was, living the very thing she had sworn she'd never become. She wiped at her eyes quickly, but Lily noticed. "Are you crying?" the girl asked gently. Sarah forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, just tired." Lily scooted closer and put her small hand on Sarah's. "My dad says tired tears are the ones that tell the truth." Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "He's a wise man." Mark entered then carrying 2 paper bags from a discount grocery. He set them down, then crouched to Sarah's level. "Look," he said quietly, glancing at Lily to make sure she wasn't listening. "I don't know why you're here, but I can see you're not like the others. You don't know the street rules. You don't even know how to hold a fork. And yet, you're trying. That counts." Sarah met his gaze, surprised at the gentleness in his tone. "Why are you telling me this? Because Mark said Lily's starting to look at you like you're more than a guest. And if you're going to vanish, do it now. Don't wait until she believes you're family." Sarah's eyes burned. "I never meant for her to—" "I know," he said. "Life doesn't care about our intentions, only our footprints." That night after Lily was asleep, Sarah sat at the small kitchen table staring at Nathan's email on her hidden phone. You need to return by Friday. Board vote imminent. She closed the phone and pressed it to her chest, eyes squeezed shut. The walls around her were thin. She could hear Mark moving in the next room, the low creak of the mattress as he lay down. She could hear Lily's soft breathing. For the first time in years, the sound of someone else's life pressed close enough to feel like home. Sarah whispered into the dark, "What am I doing?" She didn't expect an answer. But in the quiet, Mark's voice drifted from the other room, low, unguarded, almost like a prayer. "I don't know who you are," he said softly. "But please, don't break her heart." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. A sob rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She had come here to observe, to understand, to experience. But somewhere between plastic forks and hand-me-down blankets, she'd found something she hadn't planned on. Not pity, not guilt, but the terrifying, disarming weight of real. And she didn't know how much longer she could keep her mask from cracking. The smell hit, first burnt bitter and unmistakable. Sarah froze spatula still in hand as smoke curled upward from the toaster. She scrambled to unplug it, waving an old dish towel like a white flag of surrender. From the hallway, Mark's voice cut through the panic. "Is something on fire or just your expectations?" Sarah exhaled, half laughing, half mortified. "Let's go with expectations." He entered the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, barefoot shirt creased from a restless night. He sniffed the air and raised an eyebrow. "Is that toast?" "It was," Sarah said, holding up the blackened slices. Briefly, Mark cracked a smile. "You're improving. Yesterday you only managed to destroy the can opener." "I'm trying," she said, voice quieter now. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You don't have to prove anything." Sarah looked at him, eyes weary. "Don't I?" Lily came bouncing in her curls, a sleepy mess, hugging her rabbit tight. "Smells like when Daddy tried to make birthday pancakes," she announced. "That bad, huh?" Sarah smiled. Widening her eyes dramatically, Lily nodded. "We had to order pizza at 9 a.m. Sarah laughed genuinely belly deep, and for a moment the air in the room lightened. "All right," she declared. "Let's start over. No more toast. How do you feel about oatmeal?" "Only if it's the kind with the dinosaur eggs," Lily said, deadly serious. Mark glanced at Sarah. "We can't afford those." Sarah hesitated, then gave a quick nod. "Regular oatmeal it is, with imagination on top." Lily beamed. As the oatmeal simmered, Sarah set the table with mismatched bowls and plastic spoons. Her hands moved with more familiarity now, though the routine still felt like walking on a tightrope with no net. Mark sat at the table, rotating his ankle carefully. "You okay?" she asked, noticing the stiffness. "Just sore," he said. "Site's been rough. Contractors rushing the work, cutting corners." "Typical. You should rest today." "I rest, I don't eat. That's the trade." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then quietly left the room. She returned with a crumpled envelope and slid it onto the table. Mark frowned. "What's that? Just a little help. For medicine. Groceries. A decent breakfast." He didn't touch it. "You think I'm a charity case?" "No," she said, voice even. "I think you're a father who deserves a break. I didn't ask for your money. And I didn't ask for a place to sleep," she replied softly. That shut him up. Lily stirred her oatmeal, humming a tune oblivious to the undercurrent between the adults. Mark looked at the envelope again like it might explode and finally pushed it away. "You want to help," he said. "Then stay for breakfast. Just be here." "That's enough." Sarah nodded. "Okay." But inside she knew she was already breaking her own rule. Don't get attached, don't get involved, and it was already too late. Later that morning, Mark left for work with a slight limp and an old thermos clutched tight. Sarah and Lily spent the day cleaning the apartment, dusting forgotten corners, folding clothes, rearranging the bookshelf that only held 4 real books and a dozen coloring pages. In the afternoon, they visited the community garden behind the center. Lily watered plants, her tiny hands carefully guiding the stream over brittle stems. "Why do people plant things if they don't know they'll stay?" Lily asked suddenly. Sarah glanced at her. "You mean like flowers?" "Yeah." "Or people?" Sarah crouched beside her. "I think planting something, whether it's a seed or a hope, means you believe tomorrow might still come." Lily looked up at her serious. "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" Sarah's breath caught. "I want to be." "But will you?" Sarah hesitated. "I hope so." That evening, rain drummed on the roof in a steady rhythm. Mark returned, soaked boots, caked in mud shoulders, slumped from a day that hadn't been kind. Sarah handed him a towel, but he just looked at her. "You stayed," he said quietly. "I said I would." He nodded slowly. "Most people don't." They sat together at the table as Lily colored nearby. Mark finally broke the silence. "When my wife left, she didn't say goodbye, just packed a bag while Lily slept and vanished." Sarah's chest tightened. "I'm so sorry. She said she couldn't breathe here. That love wasn't enough when the bills kept coming." He ran a hand over his jaw. "I used to think I could fix everything with my hands, build shelves, patch walls, feed a kid, but I couldn't fix her." Sarah placed a hand on the table between them, not touching him, but close. "You stayed," she echoed his earlier words. "That's what Lily remembers." Mark nodded, eyes distant. "But she still draws pictures of someone she doesn't really know. A mom she only dreams about." Sarah whispered. Sometimes dreams are enough to keep hope alive. Later, as Lily brushed her teeth, Mark paused beside Sarah in the hallway. "You're good with her," he said. "She makes it easy." He hesitated. "You don't talk like someone who's lived like this." Sarah swallowed. "Because I haven't." Mark looked at her waiting. Sarah took a slow breath. "I came here because I needed to understand something. About people. About life without cushions. I didn't expect to find you. Or her." Mark's voice was barely a whisper. "So what happens when you leave?" Sarah looked down. "I don't know." Mark nodded, jaw tight. "Then be careful, because I won't survive watching her get abandoned again." That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Rain tapped softly like a ticking clock. She thought about her penthouse, her board seat, her name etched in glass. None of it felt real anymore, not after Lily's laughter or Mark's quiet warnings. She turned over, heart heavy. At some point, Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Sarah, yes, sweetie. You didn't burn the oatmeal." Sarah smiled in the dark. "Progress." The girl rolled over, already half asleep. "You smell like safety." Sarah's breath caught. In that single sleepy sentence, a wall cracked. Not from guilt, but from something deeper. A longing to belong not to wealth or power, but to this, to plastic forks, to burnt toast, to a family that didn't start with blood, but with a moment of staying when she could have left. "Is it supposed to smell like that?" Mark asked, lifting the lid of the pot suspiciously. Sarah smirked. "It's lentil soup, not a crime scene. Well, something in there just gave up on life." She swatted him lightly with the spoon. "Go sit down before I accidentally season this with shoe polish." From the living room, Lily giggled. "Daddy let Miss Sarah cook. You said her pancakes were the best disaster you ever tasted." Mark rolled his eyes but obeyed, collapsing onto the frayed couch like a man who had fought both gravity and time and lost. His construction boots thudded on the floor and he leaned back, exhaling the kind of sigh reserved for fathers who were too tired to hide their exhaustion. Sarah stirred the pot, slowly, watching it bubble with more purpose than culinary skill. Cooking here wasn't about perfection. It was about sharing something warm that didn't come from a vending machine or the kindness of strangers. It was about presence. "Dinner's ready," Sarah called, setting the bowls down on the table. Mark approached, sniffed the soup again, and offered a wary nod. If I don't make it through the night, tell Lily I loved her." Lily grinned. "I'll write your will in crayon." Sarah laughed. "Wow, no faith in the woman who didn't burn toast today." Mark took a cautious spoonful, paused, then blinked. "Okay, that's actually good. I'm a woman of many secrets," Sarah said, proud. Mark looked at her over the rim of his bowl. "Yeah, I figured that out already." The words lingered longer than they should have, but neither of them moved to unpack it. Not yet. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep coloring at the table, Mark offered Sarah a cup of tea. Loose black leaves steeped in a chipped mug that once said, "World's best dad now fated to war is est DD." They sat across from each other in the low hum of evening silence. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warmth. "You know, back where I come from, dinner is a performance. 6 courses, servers in white gloves, and wine pairings you can't pronounce." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sounds exhausting." "It is," she said, smiling faintly. "But people pay a fortune to pretend they're not tired." He sipped his tea. "I'd rather have soup and real company." Sarah nodded slowly. "Me too." Then a knock, not loud, not hurried, but firm. Mark stood instinctively, eyes narrowing. Sarah tensed, expecting someone no. He opened the door cautiously. It was Maggie, the director of the community center. In her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair, crow's feet etched by years of listening, and a no-nonsense coat that looked like it had seen more Oregon winters than most houses. "Evening," she said simply. Maggie Mark greeted, stepping aside. "Everything okay?" She glanced past him and her eyes landed on Sarah. For a fraction of a second her expression shifted, curious, calculating. "I was dropping off some flyers," Maggie said, handing Mark a small stack. "Free flu shots next week. And a lawyer came by today. Said he was looking for someone. Described a woman staying around here. Said it was personal." Sarah's heart stilled. Maggie didn't break eye contact with her. Mark glanced at Sarah, then back at Maggie. "You get a name. Didn't give one. Left a card. Said he'd be back." Sarah managed to keep her voice steady. "I don't know any lawyers." Maggie smiled politely, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course." She looked back at Mark. "You've got a good setup here. I hope you're careful about who you let in." Mark nodded slowly. "I am." Maggie hesitated, then turned to go. "Take care of that little girl. She deserves peace." And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed was sharper than any argument. Mark closed the door slowly, his hand still on the knob. "You sure you don't know who she's talking about?" he asked without turning. Sarah opened her mouth, closed it. "I don't," she said. But the lie tasted bitter this time. Mark turned. "Because if you're dragging someone's mess into my house, I'm not," she said firmly. "Whatever that was. It's not a threat to you or Lily." Mark's voice dropped. "That's not good enough, Sarah. She's 8. Her life is already complicated enough." Sarah stood facing him. "I know, and I would never, never put her in danger. Or you." Mark stared at her eyes, searching for fractures. "Then, tell me the truth." Sarah hesitated. But before she could speak, Lily stirred on the couch. "Mommy." They both froze. The little girl was half asleep, hair-tousled voice, drowsy and unfiltered. Sarah walked over and gently brushed Lily's hair back. "I'm here, sweetheart." Lily mumbled, "Promise you won't go away." Sarah's voice cracked. "I promise." Mark watched from across the room, his jaw tight. He didn't press the issue again that night. Later, when the apartment had gone still, Sarah stepped outside alone, the cold night air biting her cheeks. She pulled her coat tighter and looked up at the stars, faint behind the Portland clouds. She could feel Maggie's stare still lingering in her bones. This world didn't let you hide for long. Secrets had gravity. Eventually, they pulled everything down with them. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded envelope, the one with Nathan's business card inside. Whitmore Industries General Counsel. private and confidential. Her old life was circling like a hawk. She was running out of time. Behind her, the door creaked. Mark stood there, silhouetted by the kitchen light. Couldn't sleep, didn't try. He stepped beside her. "What are you really doing here?" "Sarah." She looked at him, eyes glassy but unafraid. "Trying to remember who I am, without everything else." Mark studied her face in the dark. "You ever think maybe you don't need to remember? Maybe you just need to start over?" Sarah's lips parted, stunned by the clarity of that. "Start over," she whispered. "Is that even possible?" Mark looked back at the closed door behind them where his daughter slept, where lentil soup had boiled, where burnt toast had somehow become a milestone. "It's not easy," he said. "But sometimes, what's broken grows back stronger." Sarah didn't speak. She just stood there staring at the man beside her, the man who didn't know her name, her past, or the secrets she carried. But maybe he was beginning to know her. The birthday banner was made of crayon-colored paper taped end-to-end uneven letters spelling "Happy Birthday Lily" with a backwards R and a crooked heart instead of a dot on the I. It was perfect. Sarah stood back, hands on her hips, staring at the small miracle they'd managed to create inside that tiny apartment. Balloons. 3 of them swayed gently from the ceiling fan. The cake was a stack of toaster waffles layered with peanut butter and jam, and someone had found a candle short enough not to tip the whole thing over. Mark surveyed it all with a quiet, appreciative nod. "She's gonna love it." Sarah smiled, cheeks dusted with flour. "It's not the Ritz, but I think we nailed heartfelt." He leaned in, voice warm. "You've got frosting on your nose." She wiped it, instinctively missing entirely. Mark chuckled. Other side. She caught it this time and gave him a mock scowl. "You enjoy this too much. Watching you lose a battle to frosting. Yeah, it's a highlight." When Lily stepped through the door that afternoon, back from her drawing class at the community center, her face lit up like the first day of spring. "You remembered." She gasped. "We didn't just remember," Sarah said, kneeling beside her. "We celebrated." Lily looked around at the decorations, the waffles, the candle. Her eyes were wide with awe. "I've never had a banner before." Mark ruffled her curls. "You do now." Lily turned to Sarah. "Is this what it feels like to be the most special person in the world?" Sarah's eyes welled before she could stop it. "Yes, baby girl. And you are." The evening unfolded with laughter and messy bites of waffle cake. Lily made them wear paper crowns cut out of cereal boxes. Sarah's kept slipping over her eyes, which only made the child laugh harder. Mark told corny dad jokes. Lily gave everyone her birthday blessing, and for a few golden hours the weight of the world stayed outside the walls. Then came the gift. Sarah had tucked it beneath the couch earlier, a delicate box wrapped in newspaper comics tied with twine. She handed it to Lily carefully. "This is from me." Lily opened it slowly, reverently. Inside was a porcelain doll, vintage, hand-painted, her lace dress still pristine, her blue glass eyes catching the light. Lily gasped. She's beautiful." Mark stiffened. "She looks like my drawings," Lily whispered. "The ones where I dream of having a mommy." Sarah knelt down, her voice soft. "Her name is Clara. She belonged to someone I loved when I was little. I wanted you to have her." Lily hugged the doll tight. "Thank you." But Mark's eyes hadn't left the box. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep, Sarah stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes when Mark spoke. "Where did you get that doll?" She turned, caught off guard. "It was mine, from when I was a girl." Mark's voice was quiet but firm. "That's not a thrift store toy. That's a collector's piece." Sarah hesitated. "She's special, and Lily deserves something special." Mark's jaw tightened. "We don't do deserve around here. We do enough. Enough to eat, enough to smile, not enough to forget who we are. I wasn't trying to make her forget." "You think she won't notice the difference?" Mark stepped closer. "One day it's a paper crown. The next, a doll worth more than our rent. What happens when you leave, and that doll is the only proof she ever meant more than reality? Sarah's voice shook. I didn't give her that doll to buy anything. I gave it because I care. You don't get to drop pieces of your world into ours like confetti, Mark said, voice low and tight. Because when it settles, we're the ones who have to clean it up. That hit deep. Sarah looked down. I thought it would make her happy. It did, he said. But happiness isn't just about now. It's about what lasts. Silence stretched. Then he added almost like an afterthought, you're trying too hard to give. Maybe what she really needs is someone who stays. Sarah stepped out onto the porch that night, the cold biting harder than usual. The sky above was fractured by clouds, the stars hiding like secrets. She sat on the steps, arms wrapped around herself. Mark's words echoed louder than the wind. You're trying too hard to give. She'd spent her entire life giving scholarships, donations, foundations. It was how she measured her worth. It was how she felt useful. But here worth was in the quiet gestures, a cooked meal, a birthday banner, a worn coat shared on a cold morning. Here, presence meant more than porcelain. She didn't hear Maggie approach until the older woman sat beside her, the familiar scent of peppermint oil and old books wafting through the air. You looked like someone who could use company, Maggie said gently. Sarah forced a smile. That obvious Maggie chuckled. Honey, in this town, silence speaks louder than words. They sat for a beat. Then Maggie added, You know, when you first showed up, I thought you were just another tourist in broken shoes looking for a redemption story. Sarah didn't argue. But you're still here, Maggie continued. That counts for something. Sarah looked at her. But it doesn't erase the lies. No, Maggie said. But it can be the start of a different kind of truth. Sarah blinked against the sting behind her eyes. How do I fix it with Mark, with Lily, with myself? Maggie placed a warm hand on hers. You don't fix people, sweetheart. You walk with them. Day by day, no promises, just presence. That night, when Sarah returned inside, she found Mark still awake, sitting at the table. The box, the doll, came in, resting beside him. I didn't mean to insult you, he said. And I didn't mean to step on your world, she replied. He looked up. I get it now. You weren't giving her a toy. You were giving her a piece of yourself. Sarah nodded. It was all I had left from before. Mark's voice softened. Next time. Maybe give her a piece of your now instead. She smiled, tears brimming. Okay. Then, after a pause, Mark gestured to the kettle. Tea. Sarah sat down across from him. Only if it comes with more unsolicited wisdom. He chuckled. That's the only kind I offer. The wind howled around the edges of the roof like an animal trying to claw its way in. Rain hammered the tin awning above the front door, the kind that didn't just fall, it insisted. Inside, the apartment flickered with a soft amber glow from the single lamp in the corner, casting long shadows on the walls as Sarah stirred a pot of soup. The air smelled of thyme onions and something that felt like home, even if no one could name it. Mark knelt on the floor beneath the window, a roll of duct tape in one hand, a soggy towel in the other. Water was leaking through a crack they hadn't noticed until now. I told the landlord about this months ago, he muttered. And he told you what Sarah asked, setting down the spoon, that he'd put it on the list. I assume that list is on the moon. Sarah chuckled. You want me to try Mark? Raised an eyebrow. You think he's going to take you seriously? I think I've negotiated with CEOs who make warlords look polite. I can handle a slumlord. He grinned. All right, be my guest. Just don't promise him a bonus structure. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, her hands busy with scissors and glue, cutting out a paper version of their apartment, only with flower boxes and a rainbow-colored roof. Sarah knelt beside her. What's this? It's our dream house, Lily said, proud, where nothing leaks and we have a dog. A dog, Mark called from the window. Lily grinned. a golden one. He's always warm like a blanket you can hug. Sarah felt something swell in her chest. I hope we find him one day. Lily looked up at her so earnest it hurt. I hope you stay long enough to see it. That night, after the rain slowed and the leak was temporarily silenced by 3 towels and an old cereal box, they sat on the floor, playing cards. Go fish, though Lily had made up at least 3 rules of her own. Mark played along, letting her win just enough to keep the sparkle in her eyes. Sarah laid down her cards, laughing. I'm beginning to think you two are hustling me. Lily shrugged innocently. You're just bad at cards. Mark leaned back, stretching his legs. All right, bedtime for the shark. Lily groaned. One more game. Teeth brushed first, Mark said in that dad tone that brokered no deals. Lily stood dramatically dragging her feet. Fine, but only because Clara needs her beauty sleep. She cradled the porcelain doll as she disappeared into the bathroom. Sarah looked at Mark. Thank you for letting me be part of today. You earned it, he said. More than most. Their eyes lingered on each other a beat longer than friendship, a breath short of something more. The wind outside picked up again, sending a creak through the rafters. Mark stood and grabbed a flashlight. Roof's been whining since the last storm. I should check the tarp. I'll help. He glanced at her. You sure I've burned toast and survived worse? Mark smirked. All right, grab a coat. Up on the roof, it was slick cold and filled with the kind of silence that only comes after a storm. Mark knelt beside a tier in the tarp, securing it with new nails while Sarah held the flashlight. You ever do this before he asked? No, but I've written about people who did. He laughed softly. That sounds about right. They worked in tandem for a few minutes, the rhythm of small movements oddly intimate. When they finished, they sat on the edge of the roof legs dangling over the rain-soaked shingles. The city lights twinkled below them, blurred by mist. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed and then faded. Mark handed her a thermos. Still warm. She took a sip. Ginger tea with just a hint of honey. He looked over at her. You always show up when it matters. Sarah turned to face him. So do you. He hesitated, then leaned in slightly. You don't have to be anyone else here. Just this version of you. It's enough. Sarah's voice caught. I don't know if that version exists anywhere else. Then maybe you're finally in the right place. And then he kissed her. It was slow, quiet, and steady. Not fireworks, not desperation. Just 2 people who had stopped running. They didn't speak of it as they climbed back down. Some things don't need to be named to be understood. The next morning, Mark headed out early for a half-day at the site. Lily stayed home drawing the wedding between Clara and her imaginary golden retriever, while Sarah cleaned up breakfast and reheated leftover soup. A knock at the door broke the stillness. Sarah froze. It was too early for neighbors, too late for deliveries. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door slowly. A man in a suit stood there, trim, polished, and very out of place. Nathan, she whispered. Sarah, he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Lily peeked out from the hallway. Nathan smiled gently. Hi there. You must be Lily. I've heard a lot about you. Sarah stepped between them. What are you doing here? You haven't answered a single message. The board vote is scheduled. Your name is still on the chair, but not for long. I told you not to come here, and yet here I am, risking my career because I still believe in you. I'm not her anymore, Sarah said, voice shaking. Not like that. Then you need to decide what you are, Nathan said, handing her an envelope. Soon. From behind them, a quiet voice broke the tension. Sarah Mark stood at the doorway. And then, with just enough time for the world to stop spinning, Nathan turned and smiled. Oh, you must be Mark. I've heard so much about you. Mark blinked. Nathan extended a hand. I'm Nathan, Sarah's lawyer. Sarah's heart dropped. The name, the title, the implication. Mark didn't take the hand. He just looked at her, eyes narrowing. walls rising. The door shut with a finality that made the walls seem smaller. Nathan had left, but the silence he left behind was deafening. Mark didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared at Sarah, jaw-clenched eyes hard, not like a man angry, but like a man wounded. Sarah took a shaky breath. "Mark, I can explain." "You don't need to," he said, voice quiet, cold. "He just did. Please, just listen." "I have been," he snapped, stepping back. "I've been listening since the day you walked into that shelter looking too clean, too calm, too carefully broken. I gave you space. I gave you trust. And you used my daughter." "Don't, Sarah," whispered voice breaking. "Don't say that. What am I supposed to say?" he hissed. "That this life we built in scraps and silence was just a pet project to you, a field trip from your penthouse." "It wasn't like that," she said, hands trembling. "It started that way. Yes. But everything changed when I met you. When I met Lily. I didn't expect to feel anything. That's the problem," Mark said. "You didn't expect us to be real." Lily stepped out from the hallway, her arms wrapped around Clara. "Daddy," she asked, voice small. "What's going on?" Mark froze. Sarah bent to Lily's level tears in her voice. "Sweetheart?" But Lily backed away, her brows knitting. "Why are you crying? Did I do something wrong?" Mark knelt beside her and pulled her gently into his arms. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." Lily looked at Sarah. "Are you leaving?" The room held its breath. Sarah's voice cracked. "I don't want to, but you have to." Lily asked. Sarah couldn't answer. Lily nodded slowly, her grip on the doll tightening. "Okay." That okay hit harder than any accusation. It was resignation. It was the sound of a child learning too young that love doesn't always stay. Mark stood his back to Sarah. "You need to go." Sarah's hands opened and closed uselessly at her sides. "Mark, don't do this. Not like this." "How then?" he asked. "Over dinner, while Lily draws our stick figure wedding." She flinched. "I let you in," he said, voice tight. "Not because I needed saving, but because for a moment I thought maybe you did. And I wanted to believe I could be enough for someone like you." "You are enough," Sarah said. "You've always been more than enough." "Then why lie?" Silence. She whispered, "Because I didn't know how to tell the truth, and still be loved." That stopped him. He turned slowly, eyes glassy but still unyielding. "Then maybe you've never really been loved at all." She left that night with a duffel bag, a broken heart, and a goodbye Lily never said aloud. The air outside was colder than she remembered. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe she was just warmer the day she walked in. 3 days passed. She stayed at a hotel on the edge of town. Not the high-rise she used to call a second home, but a modest inn near the river where nobody asked questions if you paid in cash. She didn't answer Nathan's calls, didn't read the headlines about Whitmore Industries' boardroom chaos, didn't open the envelope he'd given her. She just existed in quiet grief, the kind that sits with you like an old friend you never wanted back. On the 4th morning, she stood in front of the mirror, hair-tangled eyes hollow, and she whispered to her reflection, "You don't belong anywhere, do you? No answer, just the ticking of the old radiator." That afternoon, she found herself at the edge of the community center garden. It was empty rows of soil, now bare from winter. But she walked the path, slowly, hands in her coat pockets, eyes tracing where the marigolds used to bloom. "You came back," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned. It was Maggie. She looked the same, calm, steady knowing. But this time her arms were crossed and her eyes held no softness. Sarah nodded. "I didn't expect to." Maggie raised a brow. "Didn't expect to get caught." Sarah didn't flinch. "Didn't expect to care this much." Maggie tilted her head. "Care has consequences, Sarah, especially when it wears a mask. I never meant to hurt them. That's what people always say after they do." Sarah swallowed hard. "I just wanted to understand what life looked like without the noise, the money, the armor. And instead, Maggie said you became someone else's storm. Tears welled up again. Sarah whispered, "Then teach me how to undo it." "You can't undo," Maggie said, "but you can rebuild, if you're brave enough." That night, Sarah opened Nathan's envelope. Inside was a letter of resignation unsigned, and a note written in Nathan's careful hand. "They're voting to remove you next week. If you still want the company, it's yours to fight for. But if you found something more important, maybe it's time to stop fighting altogether." She stared at the paper, then slowly, carefully. She tore it in half, then again, until it was nothing but quiet confetti in her hands. The next morning, she walked into a law office and signed papers to transfer her voting shares into a new trust fund built to fund single-parent community programs across the state. And she named it the Delaney Fund. Maggie watched from her office window as Sarah dropped off the paperwork. "You're not running anymore," she said softly to herself. Then, with a small smile, "Good girl." Back at the hotel, Sarah packed, slowly folding each piece of clothing with a reverence she never had before. Each thread felt like a chapter, and she was ready to write a new one. Not as a Whitmore, not as a guest, but as a woman willing to stay if she was still welcome. Sarah hadn't touched her phone in days. Not really. She'd stared at it, picked it up, turned it over, even charged it out of habit. But she hadn't opened it. Because what would she find? Voicemails from Nathan reminding her of boardroom votes she no longer cared about. Emails from lawyers confirming documents she'd already signed. Notifications from a world that didn't feel like hers anymore. Until tonight. The rain was back Portland's signature curtain call, tapping lightly against the hotel window as if asking for permission to enter. Sarah sat curled in the corner armchair, legs tucked under her blanket draped around her like armor. The phone lit up. One new voice message. From a number she didn't recognize, but she knew. Somehow, she knew. Her finger hovered. Then she pressed play. "Hi, Miss Sarah. It's Lily." Her breath caught. "Daddy's asleep right now, and I don't know if I'm allowed to call. But I remembered the number from the paper you gave me when we played Pretend Phone at the center. You said it was your secret spy line. I kept it in Clara's shoe. A soft sniffle. I drew you a new picture today. It's of us in the garden. You're planting flowers and Daddy's laughing. You never saw him laugh like that before. But I made him laugh this morning when I told him your soup was better than pizza." A quiet pause. "He didn't say it. But I know he misses you. I miss you too. Clara still sleeps next to me and she smells like the scarf you left. Then smaller Daddy cries at night now. I heard him. He thinks I don't know. But I do. He cries when he thinks I'm asleep. He misses you with his whole heart. I think mine misses you too." Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to steady her breath. "You promised you wouldn't go away. But maybe. Grown-ups forget their promises sometimes. That's okay. I just wanted you to know. If you want to come back, we didn't throw away your bowl. It's still there, waiting. Beep." The message ended, but the echo of it lingered. Not in the room. In her. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. She watched the clock tick past 1 a.m., then 3 hours, then 4:15. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Lily's voice. "We didn't throw away your bowl." By sunrise, Sarah was standing at the mirror. She stared at the woman in front of her. The same face, same hair, same posture. But something had changed. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was dressing up as someone. She just was. No title, no wealth, no press release, just a woman who missed a child and a man, and the version of herself she'd only just begun to understand. She stepped out of the hotel with nothing but a backpack. No driver, no assistant, no entourage, just her feet and a destination. The community center was quiet when she arrived. Morning sun spilled through the windows like spilled honey, soft and golden. Maggie was in her office sipping tea glasses perched at the edge of her nose as she reviewed paperwork. Sarah knocked lightly on the door frame. Maggie looked up and smiled. "You got the message?" Sarah nodded. "She said she only left one. She only needed one," Sarah whispered. Maggie set her cup down. "You're not here for redemption, are you?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm here for something harder." "What's that forgiveness?" Maggie leaned back in her chair. "That's not something you earn with good intentions." "I know." But Maggie said, standing and walking around the desk, "It is something you build, one honest step at a time." Mark was on the roof again. She spotted him from the garden hammer in hand shirt, damp with sweat, moving like a man trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. She waited until he noticed her. He froze, then climbed down slowly. When he landed, he didn't speak. Neither did she. Until she did. "I got Lily's message," she said, voice trembling. "And I've never been more grateful for a crayon in a pretend game." Mark's jaw flexed. She wasn't supposed to call. "I'm glad she did." He crossed his arms. "You back to collect more notes for your next book?" "No," she said softly. "I'm here to say I'm sorry." Mark said nothing. Sarah stepped closer. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because I thought I wasn't allowed to care anymore, that I had broken something too precious to be fixed." Mark looked at her then. Really looked. "You did break something." She nodded, tears welling. "And I can't change that, but I can choose what I do next." Silence stretched. Then Mark spoke. "She drew you in her dream house, right next to the rainbow roof. Said the house would leak unless you were in it." Sarah's voice cracked. "I'd live in that house, leaks and all." He studied her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because she's there," Sarah said, eyes shining. "Because you are, and because this time, I want to stay." Behind them, the door creaked open. Lily stood there holding Clara. Her face was unreadable at first. Then, slowly, she smiled. "I told you she'd come back." Sarah knelt. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I broke my promise, and I don't deserve another." Lily walked over and hugged her tight. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to keep it this time." And in that tiny garden, surrounded by nothing extraordinary, something sacred was planted. Not just forgiveness, but the start of something true. Mark sat alone at the kitchen table, his hands folded around a chipped ceramic mug. The steam had long since faded, but he hadn't moved. Across from him was an empty chair. It used to be just furniture, but now it meant something. She had sat there eating burnt toast, telling stories, laughing with Lily. That seat had held a stranger once, then a friend, then something he hadn't dared to name, until she left. And now the chair felt like a wound. Maggie knocked gently on the doorframe, holding a folder in one hand and a faint smile in the other. "I don't usually make house calls," she said. "But sometimes the mountain doesn't move until you push it." Mark didn't look up. "I don't have time for riddles." She stepped in anyway, sat down across from him, uninvited, but not unwelcome. "She came to see me," Maggie said. "Yesterday. Brought papers." Mark said nothing. "She's transferring her entire voting share to a new community trust. Unrestricted grants, scholarships, programs for single parents." Mark finally looked up. "Why?" "Because Maggie said, leaning in, she doesn't want to fix the world anymore. She wants to belong to a piece of it." Mark swallowed hard. "She named the trust after you." His breath caught. What Maggie opened the folder and slid the document across the table. The Delaney Fund. "She said it wasn't charity," Maggie continued. "Said it was an apology in action. That words aren't enough for people who've been left behind too many times." Mark stared at the name. Black ink, clean paper, but it hit him like a freight train. "She doesn't owe me this," he said. "No," Maggie said softly. "But maybe you owe yourself the chance to believe someone means it." That night, Mark found Lily curled up on the couch with Clara coloring a new page. It was a dinner table, stick figures gathered around it laughing. 3 chairs, 3 people. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing to the figure with long hair. Lily smiled without looking up. "Sarah." He sat down beside her. "You think she's coming back again?" "I know she is," Lily said with the quiet conviction only children can carry. She promised this time. Mark looked at the picture. "You gave her a seat." Lily shrugged. She never really lost it. Mark brushed her curls back gently. "You're a better forgiver than I ever was." "That's why you have me," Lily said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The next morning, Mark stood at the entrance of the community center, heart pounding like it used to before big fights when he boxed in high school. Except this was no match. This was surrender. He found Sarah in the garden again, kneeling in the dirt, planting marigold seeds. She didn't look up at first, just kept working, pressing her fingers into the soil. "You're early," she said quietly. "I didn't want to miss you again." Sarah finally looked at him. His face was unreadable, but his eyes weren't angry anymore. Just tired, worn, open. "I saw the trust," he said. "I didn't do it for credit." "I know." He stepped closer. "And you named it after me." She stood brushing dirt from her hands. "I didn't know what else to name the thing that saved me." He let that land, then said, "You did hurt us." "I know," she said, "and I'll spend every day earning back what I broke, if you'll let me." Mark took a breath. "You said something once, that you didn't know who you were without all the noise." "I remember." He nodded slowly. "Well, the noise is gone. And what's left is someone I might be able to trust again." Sarah's lip trembled. "Might" he gave a half smile. "You're still on probation. I'll take it." They stood in silence for a moment. 2 people with battle wounds too deep for bandages. Then Mark said, "Come to dinner tonight, if you want. No speeches, no gifts, just a seat." Sarah blinked. "You're inviting me back." Mark looked her in the eye. "No, I'm saying the door was never locked." That evening when she arrived, Lily ran straight into her arms. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered into Sarah's coat. Sarah knelt down and hugged her tight. "I'll never leave without saying goodbye again. That's a promise. Cross your heart, cross my soul." At the dinner table, there were only 2 bowls when Sarah arrived. Lily reached into the cabinet and pulled out a third. Without a word, she placed it in front of the empty chair. Sarah looked at Mark. He just nodded. "I told you," Lily said, beaming. "We didn't throw your bowl away." And for the first time in a long time, Sarah sat not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as someone who belonged. They didn't talk about the past that night, didn't dissect wounds or pull at scabs. They ate lentil soup and laughed about the leaky roof. They cleaned up together and shared tea without needing words. And in the quiet that followed, Sarah looked around the small, imperfect apartment and thought, "This is the richest I've ever been." The apartment was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that echoed with absence, but the kind that settled after healing, soft, tentative, and real. Mark dried the last dish and set it gently into the mismatched cabinet. Sarah stood nearby, wiping her hands on a towel, watching him with a gaze that held both gratitude and gravity. The air between them felt different now. Not heavy, just true. He leaned against the counter and met her eyes. "You stayed," he said. Sarah nodded. "You gave me a reason to." Mark crossed his arms. "I think we've danced around it long enough, don't you?" She knew what it was. Everything that had been left unsaid, suspended between broken trust and rebuilt connection. So she stepped closer, and she began. "I used to believe I had to earn love by giving things," she said. "Money, opportunities, grand gestures. I thought if I poured enough out, someone would finally see me." Mark's brow furrowed, but no one ever looked beyond the gifts. Sarah gave a sad smile. "No, they just kept taking, and I kept hoping." He nodded slowly. "Until here." She exhaled. You were the first person who saw through me. And you were the first one I was terrified of losing, not because of status or image, but because you made me feel safe." Mark looked down for a moment, then back up. "I didn't need a millionaire Sarah. I needed someone who meant what they said." "I know," she whispered, "and I broke that. But you came back," he said. "Not to fix, to stay." Her voice trembled. "Because I love you." He didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, he stepped toward her close enough that the air between them pulsed. "Then say it again," he said. "Not like someone asking for forgiveness. Say it like someone who means it." She looked straight at him. "I love you, Mark Delaney. Not for what you've lost, not for what you carry, but for who you are every single day, quietly, stubbornly, deeply, good." He studied her face, and in a voice raw with emotion he replied, "I didn't think I'd ever trust a woman again." Sarah's breath caught. Mark continued, "But then you showed up with burnt toast duct tape and a broken heart, and somehow made this broken place feel like home again." Sarah blinked back tears. "I don't want perfect," he said. "I want present. And you've been showing up even when it hurt." She reached for his hand. He didn't hesitate. They sat at the table again, this time with no food between them. Just truth. She told him everything. About the boardroom, about her parents' obsession with optics, about the loneliness that lived in her like a second spine. "I used to think if I didn't lead, I'd disappear," she confessed. Mark squeezed her hand. "Maybe what you needed was to belong, not lead." And then he spoke of his wife. How she'd disappeared one winter morning without saying goodbye. How he'd spent months blaming himself. How he'd buried his trust so deep he'd almost forgotten what it looked like. "I built walls," he said. Then Lily started drawing doors. Sarah smiled through tears. "And you let me walk through one." Mark looked at her, his voice low. "I didn't know if I could love again. I was afraid that if I opened my heart I'd lose what little I had left." She leaned forward. "But sometimes you have to risk breaking open to let light in." He reached up, brushed a tear from her cheek. Then he whispered, "I love you too." It wasn't grand, it wasn't cinematic, it was quiet, earned, and real. Lily peeked around the hallway corner. "You're crying again," she said, arms crossed with mock judgment. Sarah and Mark turned toward her, laughing through their tears. "I'm happy," Sarah said. "Is that why Daddy's smiling like he won the lottery?" Mark chuckled. "Something like that." Lily stepped forward. "So, does this mean we can build the dream house now?" Sarah tilted her head. "The one with the rainbow roof and the golden retriever," Lily added. Mark grinned. "Let's start with dinner plans." "Okay," Lily said. "But only if Sarah gets her own chair again." Sarah looked at her. "I don't need a chair, sweetheart. Just being with you two is enough." Lily rolled her eyes. "Grown-ups say weird things. Chairs matter." Mark stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out the third bowl. Placed it in front of the seat she'd once used. "I think it's time this table had 3 again," he said. That night they didn't need candles or speeches or music. They sat together in the soft hum of the fridge and the laughter of a child who felt whole again. And as the soup simmered on the stove and Lily made paper crowns from grocery bags, Sarah realized she hadn't just come back. She'd come home. The morning sun poured through the small kitchen window like warm honey dancing across the countertop and bathing the room in gold. It was the kind of light that didn't just illuminate, it healed. Lily sat at the table in her yellow pajamas, feet swinging beneath her chair, coloring a fresh page from a new sketchbook. Sarah stood by the stove, stirring oatmeal, humming a soft melody. No earrings, no blazer, just a cotton tee and peace in her eyes. Mark leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand, watching both of them with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had known storms and now treasured the stillness that followed. This wasn't the life Sarah had planned. It was better. "Okay, breakfast taste test begins now," Sarah declared, setting bowls down in front of everyone. Lily sniffed the oatmeal like a food critic on a reality show. Cinnamon. Maybe too much hope. Sarah laughed. Too much. Mark smiled. Hope is never too much. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment before Lily put down her spoon. "Is this what families do every morning?" she asked. Sarah paused. "What do you mean? I mean, sit at the table, eat oatmeal, laugh, not run away." Mark looked at Sarah. She met his gaze, her eyes full. Sarah leaned toward Lily. "Families aren't perfect, sweetheart. They don't always get it right, but real families. They stay, even when it's hard." Lily nodded slowly. "I'm glad we're a real one now." Mark reached over, squeezing Sarah's hand. "So am I." Later that day, the three of them walked down to the community center. The sun was high, a gentle breeze catching Lily's curls as she skipped ahead, pointing out clouds shaped like animals and superhero capes. When they arrived, a modest banner hung above the entrance, the Delaney Foundation. Grand opening today. The courtyard was filled with folding chairs, paper cups of lemonade, and families, real ones, sitting together, laughing, talking, healing. Sarah took a deep breath. "Are you ready?" Mark asked. I think she said, smiling for the first time. "Yes." Maggie stood at the small podium adjusting her glasses. "Today," she began, "we open a new chapter in this community not because someone wrote a check, but because someone chose to stay." She looked at Sarah. She came to us with a name most people would recognize, and a story no one had heard. But what she gave us wasn't money. It was vulnerability, time, soup, duct tape, and love. The crowd chuckled softly. Mark slipped his arm around Sarah's shoulders. And today Maggie continued, thanks to her and this family beside her, single parents in this city will have access to emergency housing, after-school programs, job training, and most importantly, a second chance. The applause was gentle but genuine. Sarah stepped up to the microphone, heart pounding but steady. She looked out at the crowd, then down at Lily, who gave her two enthusiastic thumbs up. Then she began. "I used to think home was a place with clean walls and expensive light fixtures," she said. "Now I know. Home is where someone remembers your bowl." Laughter rippled through the audience. She smiled. "I left the world I built because I realized I'd built it with the wrong materials. Status, perfection, distance. What I needed was presence. And I found it here." Her eyes found Mark's. "I found it with a man who taught me that strength is quiet, that showing up day after day is the most powerful thing a person can do. And I found it in a little girl who kept a promise in the bottom of a doll's shoe." Maggie wiped a tear discreetly. "I don't know where life takes us next," Sarah said. "But I do know this. I'm not leaving. I'm not running. I'm here. For good." That night, back in the apartment, the table was fuller than ever. They'd invited two other single-parent families from the center to share dinner, homemade chili cornbread, and laughter served in mismatched bowls. Lily ran around playing hostess with Clara tucked under her arm. Mark leaned in towards Sarah. "You've changed the definition of wealth," he said. Sarah smiled. "Turns out, I was poor in all the ways that mattered." He touched her cheek. "Not anymore." As the dishes were cleared and the room dimmed to soft lamplight, Lily climbed into Sarah's lap, wrapping her arms around her. "I don't need the dream house anymore," she said sleepily. Sarah kissed her forehead. "Why not? Because you're here." The wind outside brushed gently against the windows, but this time it didn't sound like something trying to get in. It sounded like something being kept out. The world would always be noisy, but in this small home filled with soup and stick drawings and second chances, there was peace, there was love, there was family, and above all, there was someone who finally understood, you don't need to be rich to give. You just need to be real. Sometimes the people we meet by accident end up being the ones who heal us the most. Maybe you've met someone who changed your idea of family. Maybe you've had to start over or pretend to be strong when all you wanted was a place to belong. If this story touched you, we'd love to hear your story. Have you ever witnessed a moment of quiet kindness or lived through a second chance that changed everything? Share it in the comments below. Not just for us, but for someone out there who might need hope today. And before you go, let us know where you're watching from. We're building a global circle of listeners, and your presence matters here. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel so you never miss a story that might just stay with you forever. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you walk away from this story a little more open, a little more grounded, and a lot more reminded that love doesn't need permission. It just needs a door left open.